Formal Russian trade relations with Central Asia began in 1738, when the Russian government decided to permit the export of gold and silver coin as well as iron and grain to this area. Earlier Russian trade with the Cossacks and the Khanates of Central Asia had occurred on a local and informal basis. With the development of an all-Russian market in the 18th century, Russian merchant companies became more interested in trading with the Cossacks and in exporting Russian goods through the steppe territory to the markets of Central Asia, Persia, and China. During this period, Russian traders representing the large merchant companies dominated trade with this region, and over two-thirds of the goods went through Orenburg or Semipalatinsk, destined for markets to the south or east. Russian merchants bought livestock and related products from the Cossacks. A document from October 31, 1785, reported that in a 3-month period of that year livestock valued at over 200,000 rubles had changed hands. The Cossacks bought sugar, cloth, grain, and some metal goods from the Russians. Nonetheless, most of this trade remained localized, whereby Cossacks traded their goods with neighboring Russian peasants. At the beginning of the 19th century, the Russian government adopted a new tariff structure designed to make the terms of trade with Asia more favorable. In 1817, legislation governing imports from Asia levied a 1% duty on service goods and a 2% duty on all intermediate products. Inexpensive manufactured items were taxed 10 to 20% and luxury items 25%. There was no duty placed on cotton, livestock, fish, and medicines. These latter items were the goods that Russia hoped to import from Central Asia. Regular trade routes through the Kazakh steppe were established during the first half of the 19th century, based on established caravan routes. Before the pulling of the railroad, there were 3 major water routes that brought goods from the Volga River to the Caspian Sea and then either across the steppe to Bukhara and points further east or south to Persia. This form of transport was kozdi, about 2 rubles per pud, 36 pounds avodopois, depending upon the destination, and the goods were in transit an average of 2 months. It was far easier to send goods overland to Orenburg and then via camel caravan to their destination. From Orenburg, goods sent to the seasonal Kazakh markets in the western part of the steppe, the largest of which was in Khanskaya Stavka, were separated. Some put on caravans for Kiva, the rest sent in large caravans to either Semipalatinsk or Petropavlovsk. From Semipalatinsk, goods were dispatched to the seasonal markets of the Middle Horde and sent on caravans to Kokand, Kuldia, and Kashgaria. Caravans were organized from Petropavlovsk to Tashkent, Bukhara, and Turkestan as well as to Kuldia and Kokand. During the first half of the 19th century, the trading settlements established by the Russians nearly a century before, in Orenburg, Orsk, Uralsk, Semipalatinsk, Petropavlovsk, and Troitsk, took on the character of European towns. Merchants from European Russia came annually and increasing numbers of Russian artisans set up workshops in Orenburg and Semipalatinsk, the largest of these towns, either fashioning metal goods to be traded to the Cossacks or curing and tanning Kazakh leather for sale in the European provinces. The caravan trade was seasonal, since the dirt trails that traversed the steppe were impassable after winter snows. Crossing the steppe was dangerous at any time of year, however, because of the constant risk of internal dispute among the Cossacks or some sort of anti-Russian display, in spite of the fact that all caravans were escorted by members of the Kazakh clans that controlled the territory. Because of the dangers and difficulties inherent in travel, only a few caravans, but each with up to several hundred carts, made the journey across the steppe each year. There was an annual or biannual caravan from Orenburg to Bukhara, a journey of 75 to 80 days in 1850, and one caravan each year from Orsk to Bukhara, which took 40 to 50 days. These caravans returned with raw cotton. There were 3 caravans sent each year, in May, August, and November, from Petropavlovsk to Tashkent, and 2 caravans from Troitsk to Tashkent. The merchants of Tashkent sent their goods, mostly fruits, rugs, silks, and crafts, to market in Troitsk once in winter and 2 or 3 times in summer. Kivan merchants sent the majority of their goods, the most important of which was raw cotton, to Orenburg in 2 or 3 caravans per year. They also sent 1 caravan to Astrakhan annually. Although the Russians built some roads and highways in the years following the 1867 Turkestan Statute, the difficulties of transport were not relieved until the construction of the Trans-Siberian Railroad at the end of the 19th century. The high cost of caravan transport was reflected in the price of the items sold in Russia, particularly that of cotton. These problems might have slowed the expansion of Russian trade with Central Asia, but they did not dampen the interest of Russian merchants and manufacturers. During the period 1825 to 1830, there was a sharp increase in Russian exports to Asia, and when in the 1830s there came a rapid drop in the amount of goods exported to Persia, increased trade with Central Asia and China took up the slack. In 1840, 36.8% of all Russian goods sent abroad went across Russia's Central Asian borders. Crossing the steppe was dangerous at any time of year, however, because of the constant risk of internal dispute among the Cossacks or some sort of anti-Russian display, in spite of the fact that all caravans were escorted by members of the Kazakh clans that controlled the territory. Because of the dangers and difficulties inherent in travel, only a few caravans, but each with up to several hundred carts, made the journey across the steppe each year. There was an annual or biannual caravan from Orenburg to Bukhara, a journey of 75 to 80 days in 1850, and one caravan each year from Orsk to Bukhara, which took 40 to 50 days. These caravans returned with raw cotton. There were 3 caravans sent each year, in May, August, and November, from Petropavlovsk to Tashkent, and 2 caravans from Troitsk to Tashkent. The merchants of Tashkent sent their goods, mostly fruits, rugs, silks, and crafts, to market in Troitsk once in winter and 2 or 3 times in summer. Kivan merchants sent the majority of their goods, the most important of which was raw cotton, to Orenburg in 2 or 3 caravans per year. They also sent 1 caravan to Astrakhan annually. Although the Russians built some roads and highways in the years following the 1867 Turkestan Statute, the difficulties of transport were not relieved until the construction of the Trans-Siberian Railroad at the end of the 19th century. The high cost of caravan transport was reflected in the price of the items sold in Russia, particularly that of cotton. These problems might have slowed the expansion of Russian trade with Central Asia, but they did not dampen the interest of Russian merchants and manufacturers. During the period 1825 to 1830, there was a sharp increase in Russian exports to Asia, and when in the 1830s there came a rapid drop in the amount of goods exported to Persia, increased trade with Central Asia and China took up the slack. In 1840, 36.8% of all Russian goods sent abroad went across Russia's Central Asian borders. With the growth of the Russian cotton industry in the 1850s and 1860s, the demand for Central Asian cotton increased. The total number of poods of cotton imported annually went on an average of 527,000 in 1841 to 1845 to an average of 2,421,000 in 1857 to 1860. When the American Civil War brought an embargo on U.S. cotton, Russian merchants were left in a precarious position. The price of Central Asian cotton at the Nizhny Novgorod, present-day Gorky, market quickly rose from 4 to 5 rubles per pood in 1860 to 12 to 13 rubles in 1862, then to 22 to 24 rubles in 1864. Completion of the Russian conquest of the Kazakh steppe in the 1840s and 1850s eased the conditions of transport somewhat but did little to encourage the local khans of the Central Asian states either to produce more cotton or improve the terms of trade with Russia. After the Turkestan territory was conquered in 1864 to 1865, there was an immediate explosion in the cotton trade. Russia imported massive amounts of raw cotton, and exports of cloth to Kokand went from 74 rubles in 1864 to nearly 12 million rubles in 1867. The first stage of the expansion of Russia's control of Central Asia was the conquest or annexation of the Great Horde. In the 1730s, when Khans of the small and middle hordes swore their fealty to the Russian Empress Anna Ioannovna, one part of the Great Horde joined the clans of Ali, Abul Kha's son, and became Russian subjects. The majority of the Great Horde, however, remained under the control of the Junggar state. When the Junggar Empire was defeated in 1756, vast new pastures were opened up for these Cossacks who were now under Chinese rule. One group migrated to Jungaria, another remained in the Tashkent area and adopted a semi-sedentary lifestyle, some of them joining the agricultural Karakalpak population. This second group became subjects of Kokand when the troops of Olayim Khan captured Tashkent in 1808. A third group camped in the eastern Semiresh region, and quickly established their independence from China. By the first part of the 19th century, this third group, ruled by Sultan Suyuk, son of Ablai, found itself forced to choose between two powerful, expansionist states, Russia and Kokand. Suyuk decided that rule by Kokand was the greater evil, and so in 1818 swore his loyalty to Russia. This brought an additional 55,000 Cossacks under Russian rule. The Russians were quick to build on this advantage. In 1820, the Governor-General of Western Siberia sent a military detachment of 120 Cossacks to the territory of the Great Horde to secure the trade routes and to gain Russian control over the area without force. In 1824, an additional 50,000 Cossacks accepted Russian administration. The population was ruled in accordance with the 1822 reforms but was released from the Yazak, annual tribute. By 1826, the Russians controlled the entire Karatai region as well. Further expansion among the Great Horde was stalled by the threat of Kenazari Goshimov. It was not until June 1846 that a new okrug of Western Siberia was created in the region just north of Lake Zaysan. In 1847, the Russians consolidated their hold over the Kopolsk region when all of the Cossacks migrating between the Lepsy and 111 rivers, an additional 40,000 families, accepted Russian administration. This resulted in the formation of a O'Neill on January 10, 1848, to administrate the Great Horde. In 1854, this territory was made part of the newly created Semipalatinsk Gubernmia. The Russians also consolidated their hold over the Cossacks of the middle and small hordes by building a series of military outposts throughout the steppe. Kokbekti was built in 1820, Kokshayev and Karkarolinsk in 1824, and Bayan all in 1826. Fort Alexandrovsk was constructed in 1834 on the Mangyshlak Peninsula, and a new military line was established between the Emba and Ui rivers. During this same period, Kiva, under the rule of Khan Muhammad Rahim, reigned 1806 to 1825, was expanding northward into the Syr Darya and Aral Sea regions. In the 1820s and 1830s, the Russian authorities at Orenburg and Omsk sent several military missions to explore the steppe and recommend the course of Russia's future military strategy. One of the results of these missions was the ill-fated campaign against Kiva in 1839. Led by Governor-General V.A. Perovsky, development of a colonial apparatus 73 of Orenburg. Told of the military weakness of the Kievan forces, Perovsky overestimated the strength of his own forays and wholly ignored the problems of a remote desert campaign. Perovsky's expedition lost nearly 1,000 men and most of its transport. Perovsky himself was forced to flee for his life across the desert and steppe. This travesty led him to allude that the successful military conquest of Central Asia would only succeed if the Russian military presence were extended deep into the steppe. Military outposts were therefore built in Turgai, now Amengoldi, and Urges in 1845 and at Bazar in 1846. In 1847, Trotsky began an ambitious project to build two fortified lines, one, the Novo-Alexandrovsk line, from the northeast Kama of the Aral Sea for 300 miles along the Syr Darya, and the other to run southward from Semipalatinsk. The construction of these two lines began with the building of a fort at Raim, Aralsk, and Kopolsk, in the region north of the High River, and ended 6 years later with the construction of Kazalinsk in 1853 and the founding of Vimy, later renamed Alma-Ata, just south of the High River in 1854. After this, the Russians began their campaign against Kokand, taking the fort at Akhmekit, which they renamed Perovsk, later Xil Order. Russia was not the only state interested in gaining control of the Kazakh steppe. Khan Omar of Kokand, reigned 1809 to 1822, was himself following an expansionist policy toward the Cossacks. After the conquest of Tashkent, the armies of Kokand moved on to Turkestan, then crossed over to the right bank of the Syr Darya. They acquired territory northwest of the High River, annexing all of present-day Kyrgyzia and pulling many of the Cossacks of the Great Horde under their rule as well. The advance of Kokand into the steppe proceeded in two directions, from Tashkent to Kymkent, Orly-Ata, Jambul, Pishpeak, Frunze, and Lake Usuk-Kul, and along the Fergana Valley, then across the Naran River and north into Kazakh territory. Many of the sultans of the Great Horde supported Kokand because Khan Omar permitted them to collect their customary taxes from the Cossacks in return for collecting the zakat and usher in Omar's name. The Kazakh herdsmen and farmers were less pleased, for conquest by Kokand meant the beginning of a dual tax burden that required them to sell off ever greater shares of their property each year. In 1821, a group of some 12,000 Cossacks from the Turkestan, Kaynt, Syram, and Orly Atta regions, led by Tenek Tor, revolted against the Khan of Kokand. Nevertheless, Omar was handily able to defeat them. In the 1830s and 1840s there were periodic skirmishes between the Cossacks and the troops of the Khan of Kokand, and in 1858, after an increase in taxation was announced, Cossacks attacked Kokand's fortresses at Tokmak and Orly Atta. Still, despite the claims of present-day historians, the vast majority of the Cossacks seem to have been unopposed to Kokand rule and were not strongly in favor of being joined to the Russian Empire. They undoubtedly sought relief from the heavy burden of taxation that Kokand imposed upon them, where the Russians promised them as Russian subjects, but for many Cossacks the Kokand argument that they should be ruled by a Muslim ruler as part of a Muslim state had considerable weight. The Cossacks of the Great Horde, who lived in close proximity to the Muslim centers of Central Asia, had by this time assumed a stronger identification with Islam than their kinsmen to the north. They were persuaded by the arguments of the Khan of Kokand, supported as he was by the Khans of Kiva and Bukhara, that as Muslims they had an obligation to resist rule by the infidel. Although the majority of Cossacks must have had conflicting emotions, some clearly preferred Kokand rule, for the Russians encountered Kazakh resistance when they moved to take the Hai and Chu river valleys. The Russian authorities themselves put off moving against Kokand for nearly a decade after the completion of their new military lines. They were not united as to what strategy should be followed in Central Asia. St. Petersburg was committed to the expansion of Russia's role in the area, but the problem of timing was a critical one. Alexander II wanted to counter England's influence in the region without antagonizing London. The administrative structure in force at the time also ceded a great deal of military control to the local military governor-general. In 1861, when Kokand made the first move by attacking Verny, the two men with authority to order reprisals against Kokand disagreed on an appropriate strategy. Governor-General Dyagamil of Western Siberia believed that the Russian-Kokand border was not stable but favored the continuation of peace negotiations between the two states being held at Omsk. The officials in Orenburg disagreed, arguing for immediate military action against Kokand and urging a unified Russian attack on Tashkent under the commands of Siberia and Orenburg. A compromise was reached. On September 23, 1861, the Kokand fortress Kurgan was attacked, and in March 1862 plans were laid for a major attack on Kokand to occur in the unspecified future. These plans were forwarded to St. Petersburg with the recommendation that a campaign against Kokand, although costly to outfit and equip, would allow Russia to control the entire Chu Valley within a year of the attack's commencement. In late 1862, Great Britain signed a treaty of alliance with Emir Dost Muhammad of Afghanistan, which supported rumors in St. Petersburg that England planned to acquire Bukhara and Kiva. This further swelled popular sentiment, expressed with increasing frequency in journals and political commentary since the advent of the American Civil War and the embargo on cotton, that Russia should move to take over Central Asia and Transcaspian. Such an action would guarantee sufficient cotton to the Russian mercantilists and would effectively bar England from further expansion in the region, thereby safeguarding Russian borders and maintaining a strong Russian presence in the region. The unsuccessful Polish uprising in 1863 led to a further loss of Russian prestige abroad and consequently to St. Petersburg's increased interest in achieving a foreign policy coup.